Okay, so I'm going to try to get through the release updates pretty quick for 2.5, and for version 3. We talked about that more last meeting, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to get to the main topic, which is the chain code builder discussion. I know James is here for that. And then we'll talk a little bit about Fabric Admin SDK. I know Sam is here to talk about that one. Anything else people want to add to the agenda today? Okay, so let's get started. So real quick, there were two patch releases for a couple days ago for Fabric v2.5, that's 2.5.7, and for Fabric CA, that's version 1.5.10. Not too much to talk about in those. They're mostly just dependency updates to keep it on a good security footing and remove any potential vulnerabilities and dependencies. I did want to note that version 2.2 is no longer being maintained, so we've been encouraging users for a long time, or at least a few months ever since 2.5 became the LTS release, to update to the v2.5 release because we would no longer be maintaining the prior releases. And that has come to pass now. So this was the first patch update that we did on 2.5, but not 2.2. So there's more reason than ever to go up to 2.5 now. Any questions on the existing release out there? Okay. Fabric 3, we talked about this more last meeting. If you scroll up, you can see a lot more detailed notes about this, but I just wanted to give the quick highlights here. There has been some good progress since that meeting on a few of the items we talked about. Removing the output anchor peers update flag. That's something that's been deprecated for a long time. That's been removed now through a PR, so thanks for that. There's a PR open for the global endpoints removal, which is good. So we want to encourage people to configure their order endpoints at the organization level, the organization that controls that ordering node. And then removal of the Fabric Tools image. I saw there's been some good progress on that as well. There's the main work has been done removing it from Fabric samples, which is good. Thank you, Sam, for that work. And I know there was one more cleanup PR out in Fabric samples I need to get to. And once that is merged, then we can go ahead and merge that PR into Fabric repo that removes the Fabric Tools image. So that's good to remove this clutter before the version 3 release. A few other things that we need to complete before the v3 release. Finalize some of the smart BFT tests. I think most of them are done. There's just a couple outstanding ones there that need to get done. I think folks need to know who's working on that. The V1 lifecycle removal, we were waiting for just a couple other minor pull requests from Artem on that one. I haven't talked to Artem since the last meeting, so I don't see him here today, so I'll ping Artem, make sure he's still looking at that one. I said I would take this one, looking at a channel config option for CouchDB max document size. I still need to get on that one. And then Ale, I don't see Ale here, but he was going to send a communication about updating the identity mixer algorithm for the version 3 release. It would be a different algorithm than versions 1 and 2 used. So we need to have some guidance around how any users that are using that would upgrade or migrate over to the new one. Like I said, I don't want to talk about it too much, but if there's any questions, go ahead.
Yeah, so for Admix, are we going, I want to know the scope for this update just for Admix or others like MSP or BCSP also being updated accordingly? Or we
Right.
just have a new implementation and a new maybe algorithm for Admix?
So there is code in BCCSP for identity mixer that would have to get updated to use the new algorithm. I don't think it's that like you could plug in the old one or the new one. I think it would just be the new one. So that's why we had to wait for a major release to do this, because it would be a breaking change for anybody using it. So if somebody's using Identity Mixer on version 2, they'd have to essentially remove that MSP, upgrade to version 3, and then re-add the MSP using the new Identity Mixer algorithm. So I don't know all the details of that. That's why we were hoping Ale could send out a communication about the exact process for how that would work.
Okay, I see.
So I'll
Yeah,
remind
is
Ale
there
about that.
any PR links we have today, or we just we can wait for him or her to give us an update later?
There's no pull request yet. So yeah, as a first step, I asked Ale to send out something to the mailing list because it's kind of a larger change, and it may in fact require a RFC, a request for comment, because it is a breaking change that would happen in V3. Right now, it's just a proposal that Ale wants to bring. So we'll have to wait for his proposal to come in, and then we can comment on that.
Okay, I see. Thanks.
Any other questions on version 3? Okay, so let's get to the main thing, which is the chain code discussion. I know James did a lot of good work on the Kubernetes builder, so he's going to update us on that one. So do you want to share, James?
Yeah, can do. I can try anyway. So, wants me to grant access. It's gonna. I think I'm gonna have to leave and come back in. Unfortunately, sorry.
Hello, James.
Hello. Let's try again. Looking
Got
a
you
bit
back.
wet this time.
Yep, we can see it now.
Brilliant. Right. Yes. So it was kind of a sort of two reasons for sort of bringing this up, is one of which is just kind of a bit of an update of the state of the project, since I haven't kind of spoken to people in a while, and Hyperledger inadvertently archived the project. So it was just to kind of say the project's still active, definitely. In fact, it's been more active recently thanks to David, who opened an issue about private data collection indexes and fixed it, which is fantastic to have a new contributor. So it's definitely kind of making progress. And there are a few other things going on. One of the things that I'd really like to get done for any kind of version 1 release is a sort of finishing out some documentation. So I've made a start using the new make docs kind of templates that Hyperledger Fabric have got. But I need to kind of do a bit more work and fill in the kind of details, because at the moment it's just kind of a few markdown files, which with some holes I think people have discovered. And I think someone on the call was asking about the pod names for chain code. At the moment, they're kind of very human unfriendly because of all the limitations you get with pod names in Kubernetes. But I think it's gone too far. Although there are sort of labels and things you can kind of filter on, it's a bit hard to see what the pods are. So I've got a proposal I'll mention in a minute to hopefully improve those. Another piece of work is defining resource limits on the chain code pods, which I think would be a really valuable thing to get in. And then there's sort of outstanding piece of work for cleaning up chain code pods if the peer goes away. So that's the sort of things that are going on at the moment. And to that end, I've got a few questions to kind of get some feedback on some of the things around that. Like I say, the pod name thing, there are limitations on the Kubernetes side of what you can call things and the length of it, which is the reason it's so unfriendly at the moment. And there are sort of limitations from the Fabric side of things, what you can actually get hold of. But my sort of current thinking is to change it. At the moment, it's always prefixed with CC to indicate its chain code. But I was thinking of adding a configurable prefix, so you could kind of, either stick to CC or something simple like that, or have something that's related to your peer. Unfortunately, the kind of peer identity you get is a little bit unlikely to be useful because it's either too long or there's so many limitations. So a specific kind of pod prefix configuration for the builder, followed by as much of the chain code label as we can fit in there, because I think that would sort of address most of the concerns about being able to work out what's going on. And then a hash as there is at the moment, but try and reduce the size of that and sort of hopefully leave a bit more room for some of those other things. So I don't know if anyone has any comments about whether that would make it more useful or usable enough.
So James, I think some people probably don't have the background on this one. So one of the first things I was going to ask is if you could just go do a couple minute overview and like what are the objectives of the Kubernetes builder, just to get everybody on the same page first before you go into the questions.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the builder is because at the moment Fabric doesn't really say very much about how you run it. But I know a lot of people are using Kubernetes, and the kind of builders you get don't really work well in Kubernetes. In fact, I would probably argue they don't work well even without Kubernetes, in that when you kind of install and deploy chain code, you end up building them at that point. If you're using Java, you can actually put the jar inside the chain code image, so that kind of helps because that's a bit more repeatable. But particularly if you're using JavaScript, there are kind of all sorts of horrors trying to rebuild things in a kind of repeatable fashion. So the idea of the Kubernetes chain code builder is to try and do things as much in a kind of Kubernetes way as the Fabric builder and launcher pattern will allow. And it also has the advantage that you're building and kind of publishing chain code images just using standard kind of mechanisms. It's not kind of a Fabric specific thing. You can publish these things and use kind of CI/CD pipelines as you would ordinarily. And then you're just kind of pointing at that image, and you're pointing at the like a hash of that image, not a tag. So you get exactly the same image every time, which then fits in quite nicely with the peer sort of chain code lifecycle. You know what you're getting. So what the Kubernetes builder does is it will pull that image and start it in a pod. Unfortunately, like I say, it's kind of trying to balance the way that Fabric works with what Kubernetes would ordinarily do. I think in an ideal world, we'd use a deployment, and Kubernetes would have a little bit more say over the kind of life cycle of that executable. But because of the way the build and launch framework works, we're currently using a pod, so it starts a pod with the chain code in, which kind of works quite nicely. I think it's sort of, like I say, much more amenable to the sort of chain code lifecycle. It's not like the chain code as a service where you kind of start it once and then you can do whatever you like with it without going through that lifecycle again. That's brilliant for development and testing, but it's not. It's sort of kind of sidestepping the whole chain code lifecycle essentially.
Right. So I mean, the whole purpose of these external builders was so that people could plug in different things like this. Did you find it flexible enough, or do you think it's too constrained still? And would you recommend other like changes to Fabric, kind of taking a step back to make it easier to plug these things in?
So I think it's not too bad for plugging things in. I think there are some areas, and one of them is the next question along actually, that would be nice to kind of extend it a bit. And I do think it's kind of a weird sort of way that the chain code as a service fits into it. It's sort of I guess it's using it as a way of getting that kind of facility out there, but it doesn't quite make sense. And I think there might be some changes you could make that would improve the kind of linking with Kubernetes. So there might be a way to do it so that the Kubernetes builder could start it as a server. So there, yeah, I think there are some perhaps unfinished bits.
Okay, so when you're using the Kubernetes builder that you have, it's still using it kind of in client mode as opposed to as a service?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that mostly works, and it's kind of, if the pod goes away for whatever reason, and that happens in Kubernetes, then, you know, when the peer needs that chain code again, it happily starts it up. That's all kind of, that all works fine. There is the sort of outstanding question of what happens if the chain code gets left around running. And I think sort of one of the issues open at the moment is to add owner references in Kubernetes, but I think that's possibly, it might not be worth doing, because if you're running your chain code in a different namespace, for example, in Kubernetes, that's not going to work. And I think there are other situations where you might want to clear those things up if we can work out that the peer isn't around. So that's kind of one open question, I think.
Okay, and then I wanted to give a chance to anybody to ask any questions about like how the basics of it, fundamentals of it first before you go into your deeper dive questions. Does anybody else have questions?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
I'm Arne. I'm not a core maintainer, but I work on some of the Hyperledger Labs projects, and I've been using Chaincode as a service. And the most painful part of managing it for me was always to create the Chaincode package, because when you install it, the peer generates a package ID based on the hash of the package that you installed. And if you use Chaincode as a service, that package will likely be different for each of the participants if they have different addresses. And that means it always generates new different hashes. I was wondering if you ran into the same with the Kubernetes builder, or if you have a solution for that.
So for the Kubernetes builder, it's kind of lucky in that we don't have that problem. It's the thing in the chain code package is what you're running, not how you're running or how you're connecting to it. That's sort of one of the sort of strange things about chain code as a server. You're sort of packaging up almost like a configuration thing inside that, the kind of way you're connecting to. And I know the chain code as a server builder that's sort of built into Fabric has a sort of templating thing that helps with that a bit. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes, yeah, and that helps. That kind of makes it that you can at least have this as a template. The pair ID, for instance.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is nice, but it clearly is not a first-class citizen in Fabric, the way to run your chain code this way. And
No,
I see
it is
that
kind of it's sort of shoehorned in, I think it feels like anyway. Yeah.
I see that you're wondering about the chain code specific configuration. And I was wondering, are people still using chain code in the old way of actually building the code? And if there are not so many people, then could we consider something like the chain code ID in the lifecycle? Is it necessary that it's a hash? Is that part of Fabric's security model? Or does anyone know how that's used?
I think that might be a question for Dave, for the sort of background of the sort of chain code lifecycle, but
Yeah, every time I have to address these questions, I have to go look at how it works again. I can't keep it all in my head.
yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, if this chain code builder with Kubernetes, if this is we kind of as users we need a recommended way to run chain code in Kubernetes, whichever way it is. That's kind of my request.
Yeah, and I think that this builder works better in Kubernetes than the chain code as a server, because you are then agreeing using those kind of lifecycle commands. You're agreeing what you're running in a channel.
Yeah,
and you don't have that kind of weird, like you say, the hash doesn't change due to where you're running it or anything like that.
okay, that's great. Yeah.
I know in the IBM offering, they have a custom builder as well, and it'll generate it still builds the image from scratch and then deploys it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a little bit different than what James' Kubernetes builder does, where you've got the package already built or the image already built. So yeah, there are a few other options out there. So it'd be good to kind of share some of these ideas and see if we can land on a common point, design point at least.
Yeah, I think there are, as well as the IBM builder that does sort of keep that build step. I think there are some sort of open source builders that do similar things. I should make a list actually and add it to the README of this project. That might be useful.
So yeah, Arne, if you could write up your exact question and send it to me, then I could take a deeper look at it offline.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Yeah.
James, are there any changes required for the actual chain code? Like for chain code as a service, you have to start it as a service.
So for this, no, you don't have to do anything. It's you
Okay.
write chain code as you would normally. I think actually the chain code stuff has improved a bit so that it will start as a service if you
I don't think so.
Oh, right. I thought in some of them, at least, I thought Matthew had added something that would start it in different
It's
modes.
easy. It's easier to start it as a service now, but it still requires changes.
Right. Yeah.
But it's much improved over a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it used to be even worse. So, do you have a question, David?
Hello, everyone. I think not really a question, but some more about my experience using the Kubernetes builder. Okay. The first things that I switch from external chain code is because the builder, yes, we have sure which chain code is running in the peer, because the chain code builder uses the image hash. Okay, this is one the first thing, and the second thing, it's makes easier to deploy the chain codes because the peer controls all the Kubernetes things. Okay, and here in my reality, we are running the Kubernetes chain codes in a very mixed environment. So we are running this on bare metal deployment, Kubernetes complete bare metal deployments. We are running this in the Oracle Cloud, and the Oracle Cloud, the builder is deployed as ARM instance. We are using the Ampere instance on Oracle and Azure as well. So this simplified a lot our CI/CD pipelines. This is one of the reasons that we switched to the chain code builder. And I have some things to say about the things that I think how we could improve the chain code builder. One is that we are showing this on the screen. The chain code pod names, yes, will be a very good thing if you know which chain code is running. and on a way to pass the resource limits. And my next contribution that I'm beginning to work in this week, it's a way to pass using environment variables the resource limits of the chain code pod. Okay. And another thing that I think that will be good to have on the Kubernetes builder. We face a little problem when we are running the pipeline sequentially, because the builder does not kill the older pods. So I know this probably is it's a Fabric model, keeping the old chain code running and accessible. But maybe if we have a parameter that we could kill the older pods, will be good, because when running developed environment, we almost get all of the Kubernetes resources. Okay, so that's it. All I can tell about the builder, and I'm very happy to be able to contribute with this project. Okay.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think that sounds like it might play into what Dave Enyard was saying about are there things in the sort of launcher and builder area in Fabric that are missing? Because I don't know if there is any way that the peer ever gets rid of chain code. Is that?
Yes, I think we can kill all the older pods. If we have the new if you know the new pods running, we can kill all the older pods after the deployment of the new pods. I think we now are implementing a script to do this query about the pods that are created by the peer and killing it. And we know if we kill all the pods without doing any query, the peer will recreate the pods if the pod's not running. But yes, I think it's a good thing. We implement a fast way and a good way of killing the older pods.
Yeah, I was just kind of trying how to tie what is a newer pod for an older version of the chain code, how to tie those things together in the launcher, because it doesn't get all the information that you sort of put in when you're kind of installing and approving and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't get the version, for example.
Yes.
When you create the pods, could you add labels with name version?
But we don't. So the builder and launcher framework doesn't give that to the script that runs it. So we don't have that information to add. So that might be one area that we could kind of improve. Yeah.
That's going to make somebody who's not aware is going to make it really difficult to debug.
Yes.
There's no way to determine the chain code name and version.
Presumably with the commands, you could kind of have to look at, I don't know what peer lifecycle commands there are. You could get that information, but you'd then have to kind of label things up after the fact, which is horrible.
Yeah, James, if you could open any Fabric issues for some of these things that you think would help, that'd be good. And then to your question, can the peer get rid of a chain code? I don't think it has any way to do that now, does it?
I'm trying to think. I'm not sure it does.
Like Chris, do you recall how you guys do that, or if you do that?
And that's just it. Right now we don't, and it's a bit of a problem.
So what do you do? Just restart the peer and
you can restart the peer, and it's less than optimal, but it does work. That's something we were looking at proposing for the the IVP chain code builder was looking at name version. And as a new, even then it's a little tricky, because versions aren't necessarily numeric and aren't necessarily consecutive.
Yeah, it's true.
So it gets a bit dicey.
Using
Yeah,
a
so we can add things anytime, of course, that are not breaking. So if we need to pass additional parameters or have some way to remove chain codes that aren't being used, we can add those anytime. But we do have a unique opportunity since we've got a major release coming in Fabric version 3 to, if we need to make any
Right.
changes to the way
It'd be a good
external
time.
builders work fundamentally, we could potentially do that as well. So I'd like to consider ideas in both spaces. But James, you want to go on through your questions now? I know you started, but we've halted you a couple times.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so sort of carrying on the kind of theme of things that might be useful to add is so the request to kind of configure chain code on a per sort of chain code basis. At the moment, I think I'm right in saying so the builder gets configuration through environment variables. So as David said, he's looking at adding a way to configure resource limits, which would work on a kind of builder level. And if you wanted different limits for different chain codes, say you've got chain code needs much higher limits, I think you could do that if you only installed the chain code on specific peers and configured those peers differently. Am I right in thinking that?
well, for now, this question is to me, James.
No, it was more for kind of Dave or Chris or someone that knows the Fabric kind of model. I think you can install chain code on specific peers. So the builder you would configure the builder differently on different peers to have different limits. You can't do it per chain code, but you could do it per peer.
Right.
Yeah. So it would be nice if there was a way of kind of getting some configuration information to the launcher for specific chain code rather than kind of all or nothing that we've got at the moment.
Yeah, you could potentially pass that through in the package, right? If there's a way to do that.
So I was thinking not in the package because I don't think it makes sense because if it's in the package, you have to go through the whole chain code lifecycle thing just to change something. So to change resource limit, it would be strange to kind of repackage that and go through that chain code lifecycle. It would be even more strange if you wanted to just enable debugging on one chain code. So I think it'd be nice if there was a way that you could kind of pass configuration that sort of was not really related to what's running, but how it's running. And for that to kind of appear, at the moment you get, there's like a chain code JSON file that the run binary gets, either sort of adding things into that or a separate configuration JSON file that the run binary could kind of pick up and you could configure things per chain code. That might be
in the peers configuration in the external builder section, isn't there a set of environment variables you can set to the propagate? I thought that was like an open-ended list.
Yeah, so that's what we're using, but that's per peer then essentially, not per chain code.
Yeah.
Which is kind of not very granular. I think there's sort of a desire to be able to configure. So for example, the sort of chain code limits, if you the resource limits, you might have most of your chain code would be fine with sort of lower limits, but you might have one that you needed higher limits for, and that's not really possible other than, like I say, you'd only install it on a specific peer that then, as you say, you use those environment variables to configure the builder on those peers.
Yeah, I gotcha. So we might want to have, in addition to the peer scoped, be able to specify chain code scoped parameters that get propagated. Yeah, makes sense.
And perhaps do that with the peer lifecycle commands. So when you do the install, perhaps provide some configuration, and then I'd sort of put in this sort of guessing that you could have a peer lifecycle chain code configure command to kind of update those later.
Just a question. we have one-to-one. Each peer has its own chain code, correct? So the less granular is the peer, or we have a model that one peer can have multiple chain codes deployed.
Yeah, you can have multiple chain codes on the same peer.
Okay, understood. I was working with only one chain code by peer deployment. Okay.
If
Here-
you did that, if you had one chain code per peer, then you could definitely have configuration per chain code, because you could use the environment variables, like Dave was saying.
Yes, this is the PR that I started to work, passing using the environment variables that will be propagated. The results.
Yeah. So I think that's what we have to do now, and I think that makes sense, and it will cover most cases. It's just kind of if people want something per chain code on the same peer.
Okay, and I will talk to you to know how do we launch other more than one chain code by peer. I don't know how to.
Leaving this here until we have that discussion, or you should.
Okay, but yes, thank you by the explanation.
So I think that was most of the questions I had. And I think it makes sense. Yeah, if I can submit some issues to Fabric with some ideas for the sort of builder and launcher stuff, I'll do that.
Okay, there's some background noise. I don't know if that was Chris or David. If you can mute yourself. Thank you.
Is there anything we should be doing to make this more visible, particularly, I guess, when we get to Fabric 3? Even if it's just calling it out in the docs as an option for deploying chain code.
I think the sort of long-term hope is this might end up being one of the built-in builders, like the chain code as a server. But there was sort of pushback when we originally suggested that, so it sort of ended up as a separate project. I guess because it is sort of tied to one particular deployment technology, I guess it might always end up being separate. But
I don't really mind builders being a separate thing to the core Fabric, but at the moment it kind of feels like you only know about this if you happen to have trawled around the different labs projects or looked at discussions somewhere. And I'm not sure it's really called out to people. If you're looking to deploy on Kubernetes, which I assume most production deployments are, then this seems like it's the best fit builder for you. But I don't know how well we signpost that for people.
I guess the only signpost I know of is in the samples project, the one that came out of the Dublin conference.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to make it more prominent both in the official docs and in the samples, that there's some various options and point to them. You know, we were hesitant to put any like Kubernetes specific things into the core Fabric because different vendors have different ways of doing it, and we didn't want to pick favorites like that. But I think at least calling out the options would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing for the upcoming Fabric 3. Is someone working on a kind of, I would say, homogenization of deploying the chain code as a service as well, so that you are not longer forced to provide your own 3 shell scripts, binaries, whatever, for that detect, release, and also things like that? Because when I looked into the source code, for me, it seems to be a no-brainer to add it into the existing Go script, the additional options for type remote and the connection JSON. Does it make sense for some of you?
I wasn't following all that, but definitely, if you think something would help to be added, open a Fabric issue and we can take a deeper look at it.
Okay, because I did it already on my on my forked one. So is it useful to add it as a kind of a PR so that we can discuss it? So I won't complain if it's rejected, all fine. But what's a proposed way to interact? Is it more like creating a PR, or is it something like discussing it before? Because I think at the end, code will tell it the most from a semantic point of view, sharp way.
Yes, code is always the most specific. So if you don't mind opening the pull request, that would probably be the most clear way to do it. Then we can discuss it there. I mean, we do have issues, we have discussions, but a pull request will get the most visibility, I think.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, any other input on the topic of chain codes? Okay, that was some good discussion. We've wanted to get back to that. I know we haven't talked about it for a while, and I know there's pain points out there, so that was good. And we can do more of these as needed in the future. All right, going back to the agenda. Oh, was there one more comment? Okay, going back to the agenda, I know Sam wanted to talk about the Fabric Admin SDK.
Yeah, so I just opened the discussion. Could you please see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, so recently in admin SDK repo, we received a discussion from well, the from I suppose him, yeah. I don't know how to pronounce the name or his ID here, but it's very interesting that he wants us to open some internal packages in admin SDK to external one so that he can use the API implementation to do his own maybe test case or features, etc., consideration. So that also he suppose this idea is aligned with the points you mentioned here. Well, in fact, related with the Fabric configuration repo. So I raise up this discussion here for everyone. If you're interested with this discussion, you can join and look at with detail. So, well, maybe recall are in my memory. So previously we don't open those APIs and the implementations. So just because we want to keep the same behavior with Fabric and Fabric repo, because Fabric repo marks those as internal, right? And also we want so people just use API and for example, using some configuration file to generate the chain code blocks, etc. So with this kind of new requirement, so David and Mark, any comments for that?
I mean, it is an SDK intended to be used by people writing applications, so they need to have a good public API. So is this thing that he was talking about part of the API, or is it part of the internal implementation of the SDK? That was my question.
So in my point of view, I suppose he don't want to make configuration file, but he also references something as Lexi SDK node there to create the channel without a configuration file.
So how does the admin SDK typically work? You typically still need a config.txt file?
Yeah, today they still need a config.txt file. So what's
And
his request is that yeah, he don't want that maybe.
yeah, he wants to wait past the configuration options programmatically. I mean, that would seem to make sense in an SDK. All right, so I think both ways make sense. Yeah.
Okay, so if so, I'm going to make a PR, maybe just ask his request. So make this package from internal to available for people to invoke.
I think that makes sense.
It would be
Okay,
worth
sure.
taking a careful look at the API that package exposes and making sure that it is suitable for end users to use. We don't want to tie ourselves into something that's a bit of a internal implementation details.
Mhm.
If it is good as a public API, then I don't see any particular reason not to expose it, but it's worth taking a look at what it exposes to make sure that it does provide something that's appropriate for end users.
Right, and maybe we keep part of it
Mm.
internal, part of it public. But yeah, if you could do your assessment on that and do the pull request, and we can review from there.
Okay, I will open a pull request there, and let's see if those interface is good enough for people to invoke, and we can further discussion through the PR there.
Just one thing to call out, the links to the Fabric SDK Java there, that may be a little bit of a red herring because that's not actually allowing you to configure a channel at all. It's just defining for the client what the Fabric topology looks like. But if it's useful as a guide of a potential API, then great. But it doesn't do what people in this discussion think it's doing.
So you mean his reference here is not a good one?
Click on that link.
Yeah, I suppose this one.
Yeah, the comment says it's the Node SDK, but it links to the Java SDK.
Ah,
But
I see.
I think this code is really just defining for the client SDK what the topology of a Fabric network is that it's going to talk to. It's not actually creating a Fabric network.
Right, so that's not the channel configuration that he thinks it is.
Yeah, you're good. You're right.
Okay, anything else, Sam, on this?
Noted. Well, let's make something parallel. So maybe first, we can open a PR, but just open there to see what's going on, and meanwhile, let's ask him for further, well, example and things, to say if we open those packages, or say publish those implementations, can really benefit his code or logic. Is that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think a pull request will be the most clear way to do that, so we can ask him to see if that satisfies his need.
Okay.
Yep, thanks for keeping this one moving forward. I know it's kind of something we work on in the background gradually, but hopefully over time we'll get there. Okay, any other topics today?
Hey Dave, it's Yoav.
Hey, Yoav.
Funny.
So we talked about some of the Smart
Yeah, I
BFG things
jumped
at the
late.
beginning. I know, Yoav, there was one pull request around the Smart BFT test. I asked if you could review. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yes, I did. One unit test but was added, so I merged that. And also I merged the unit test of the small PFT chain by my. And so that completes the unit testing of the chain. And there are a couple of small issues. One about testing on the integration tests of small BFT and the block pooler, which are ongoing. And then just two more issues, I think, about just improving testing there. So that's my update.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And a question, is there an update on the timeline for V3 with respect to the other stuff that's not connected to the order, like the chain code lifecycle, etc.?
Let me share my screen. So we did mention a couple things before you came on. They're kind of smaller miscellaneous. So I guess these two are kind of smaller miscellaneous things. These ones were mostly in progress or done. The biggest one left, I think, is the identity mixer update. So I'm going to ping Ale afterwards and ask if he can make this proposal about changing the identity mixer algorithm. And then you're right, we need to I was going to ping Artem as well to see where he is on the lifecycle removal. I think that's mostly done, but he had a few more pull requests to do. So I was going to ask if he plans to do those soon. If not, if we can get somebody else to take a look at that. So yeah,
Okay.
these things kind of all have to come together before we do a Fabric 3 release.
Okay, thanks.
But I'm still hoping sometime in the middle of the year, we'll be able to get all these done and out the door.
Okay.
Okay, any other topics?
Hi, Dave. Could we discuss about some other product from the Hyperledger Labs on this forum? I have one small thing to discuss.
Sure. What was the topic again?
About the Ansible collections and the operator and the console.
Right. Let's see who we still have. I guess we might have some people that can talk about that.
But about the Ansible collection, this is regarding my reality. Okay, we are here using on this project. We are using the complete IBM stack of IBP, the Ansible collections, the Fabric console and the operator console, and until now is working very good. Okay, this is very good tools. This is one of the things I want to discuss. And I want to be connected with the people from the Fabric Ansible collections, because we have one PR open there about stripping the V prefix, because we have some errors when using the Fabric 2.5 version to run the Ansible collections. I think that PR is good to be merged if can be reviewed. This is one of the things.
And you said that's in the Ansible collection repo?
Yes, Ansible, this pull, the 46 pull requests, not me, it's created by Arner. I think he's not here, but he made a yeah.
Hi, I am.
Oh, hello, Arn. How are you? Nice to meet you.
You
Yeah,
too.
I need this change because we are running all the stack in 2.5 version.
Hey, David, Muthu here regarding your PR and the Ansible collection. So, I need to test it. Then once I will test it. I will merge your PR. It's still in on my plate only. I will have a look and I will merge it and we'll let you know.
Oh, thank you. So that's it. Congratulations by those products. These products really really helps the Hyperledger Fabric adoption. And that one last thing, I don't know if we have a dedicated page to suggest the best approach when we are putting all of these tools together. Yes, for myself, for example, I need to go deeper in a lot of code to get all of those tools together. But maybe if I don't know if we have, but one page putting all the tools together using the Ansible, using the Fabric console, the Fabric operator from IBP. I know that we have two operators. Maybe if we can receipt a page dedicated to put all of those tools together, I think it will be very much of help for the new people that wants to deploy Fabric.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know some of those projects were more recently open sourced, and there probably is not a good resource of how to pull everything together. So that's a good idea. I'll send that feedback to the team working on those projects. And then also we do plan to do some like webinars through Hyperledger sometime in the middle of the year around those topics as well. So look for those two things, but that's a good reminder.
Yes, thanks. And congratulations again. Those projects are really good projects and very well developed. Okay. And I hope that I can continue contributing with you.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback and thanks for the contributions. Okay. Anything else today? Okay. I think that's it then. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye.